Caleb Tizon is an incredible musician and music educator with a focus on diversifying music education curriculum and improving his own teaching practices. He engaged research on this topic through case study and practitioner inquiry research, offering more diverse music selections to a number of his intermediate or advanced students and exploring the impact of that intervention. He has deepened his commitment to connecting with and learning from his students, and he has much to offer the music education community. I so look forward to seeing what he does next. We'll certainly miss him here at Antioch, and I learned a ton from being his second reader and just generally from having Caleb in so many classes and working with him. So I'll miss you terribly. Caleb, please.
Thank you, Heather. Screen share. All right, can everybody see this okay? All right. So, I chose to do my project on minority representation in classical music education. I also, just as some background information, the reason why I chose to do this was it was sort of a personal issue that I had with the classical music world. I have been classically trained for a number of years and performed in that world for a number of years, more than half of my life. And I do have a passion for it, but have often felt that my creativity and even aspects of my identity have been stifled a little bit to become a successful musician. So I wanted to test the waters with diversifying the way that classical music is taught with my own students, just to see what the benefits were. So the questions that I came up with here are, what are the benefits to implementing a diverse classical music curriculum? How can music educators work to make their teaching methods more inclusive? How can music educators constantly adapt pedagogy to the needs of a diverse array of students? So in the literature review, I ended up looking at multiple kind of types of literature. First, I sought to define classical music, which I was able to find it is typically defined as a Western genre of music. Just the history of it is completely Western. I also opposed this with world music, so I kind of delved into world music and kind of asked the question as to why world music is called world music when really it can fall under any genre of music, including classical. I was able to find a lot of research on the lack of minority representation in classical music. Most of this had to do with people that were already in their careers or people that were being commissioned by colleges, so people that were already pretty deep into their training. But I did see a big gap in the literature as far as diversifying classical music education at the curriculum and pedagogy level. I did look at the current organizations and efforts, most of which were things like blind auditioning to make sure that there couldn't be any judgments from the people that were adjudicating the auditions. Yeah, just things like that, or college commission composers being nominated by their classmates so that it would eliminate biases from the staff. I ended up doing some research on inclusive education and just what that entails to see if I could kind of get any ideas for the type of inclusive education that I wanted to implement. I also looked at curriculum and pedagogy, mostly surrounding the typical classical music education. I found that most of the literature I found supported my experience, which is that the music pretty much adheres to a very strict number of composers, pretty much all Western in origin and in style. I chose my methods sorry, that sounds silly. I chose my participants because I currently teach about 25 students at 3 different studios and some home lessons. So I chose my participants based on their experience levels and just through knowing them, knowing if they would be receptive to this sort of research. Um, I chose 4 students, one teenaged Asian male, one Jewish female child, one mixed Asian American adult woman, and one young child of South Asian origin who had some differently abled qualities, both developmentally and physically. He was actually a beginner student because I had been working with him for a pretty long time, but wasn't able to get very far with him prior to this, which I'll get into later a little bit more. So I decided to alter my curriculum and pedagogy. I gauged how the students felt about me changing their curriculum and kind of deviating from what's the norm. And then I found music that sort of took their identities into account. So, for example, for my Asian male student, I found an Asian male composer. Um, and then it was obviously a little bit different for my differently abled student who was still a beginner. So what I did with him was he had a little bit of a hand disability that caused pain if he stretched his hand in a certain way. So I kind of broke down the way that I normally teach and split it into very specific steps, and very often would check in with him, make sure that he was okay, make sure that um, my standards for certain pitches. It's difficult to explain to somebody who doesn't play violin, but your fingers have to get to certain areas, and so my standards for that were a little different for him because I knew that his finger could only go so far. Um, I kind of performed all of these qualitative case studies around my students, and at the same time, I took memos, observations, and performed semi-structured interviews kind of embedded in the lessons. And I also concurrently was doing a practitioner inquiry, so making sure that I was asking myself if I was being effective and kind of changing my methods depending on the student. I didn't really realize it at the time, but what I was really looking for was a change in engagement. The findings after a few months suggest that there were 2 types of engagement that I had to kind of define, which is academic engagement and personal engagement. Academic engagement is engagement with the material, the music being learned. Personal engagement is interest in me as a person, which was something I was not expecting to see an increase in. All of my students displayed a growth in one or both types of engagement. Pretty much all across the board, it was an increase in both. So students that were previously really quiet and emotionless were suddenly laughing and just a lot more comfortable with me, asking me questions, kind of telling me more of their opinions about the music. Um, I realized that through the practitioner inquiry that I was constantly shifting my teacher practices, which is admittedly easier with one-on-one classroom environments. I'm not quite sure how I'd modify it with in a group setting. Uh, the student-centered learning was deepened because the relationships between the teacher and learner were really deepened. They just overall felt more comfortable with me. I realized that the key takeaway from this is that inclusive music ed is one way of building deeper relationships with students and letting them feel heard. But I was expecting my findings to revolve more around the music itself, and I wasn't expecting the entire dynamic to shift. And that was kind of the key takeaway that I ended up having. Just to wrap it up, my discussion, I believe that kind of future areas of research should be around engagement and how it manifests during music education, because that's really what I saw a change in. Um, to allow students to feel heard is to increase academic and personal engagement. So it wasn't so much just the fact that I was choosing music from diverse influences, but more that I was really engaging with the students, asking them questions, allowing them to give me their opinions. And that was something that was kind of embedded in every lesson at all steps of the lesson. Traditional classical music education is focused on technique at the expense of freedom of expression, freedom of creativity, identity. So I think that there is a place for traditional classical music, but I think it can be done alongside this more inclusive approach, and students can go whichever way interests them. It could be one, it could be both. Um, Richer and deeper student relationships were really what that's what I really think should be the focus going forward with music education and all education, really, allowing the students to feel heard. All right, thank you. I might have gone way over time. I'm sorry.
Well
Your
done,
time's
Caleb.
perfect.
Thank you. I'm going to stop my share. Is that okay? Thank you.
Any questions for Caleb?
I'll go. This is Jen.
Hey, Jen.
It's interesting to me that it was interesting to you that your students seem to take a more personal interest in you as a person. Is that because they suddenly realized, oh, here's a non-traditional person of color performing this Western music and teaching it to us? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that that had something to do with it, but also I went from teaching in a pretty traditional way. So I wasn't really asking questions beyond what kind of music do you want to play? Do you want it to be fast, slow, dark, bright? And now I was asking them, like, how do you feel about your identity? And what if you had to choose music that was revolving around your identity, which aspect of yourself would you choose? What would you prioritize? I would always be asking them, is this music too easy? Is it challenging for you? If you don't feel that it's enough of a challenge or that it's too much of a challenge, then we can change it. So I think that it was just the fact that I was suddenly going from just being a teacher to being somebody who was giving them an equal voice in the classroom setting.
Wow, that's heavy. Good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Caleb, this is Yana. I was gonna say, like, I've definitely found our work really parallels over the year, and today when I heard you present, it really struck me that it kind of answered my question earlier of that perhaps the reason why some of us stop creating is that there is not a presentation out there with the same voice or similar voice, So I really appreciate that takeaway from today. It took a year to take it away, but I did. I really love that you're doing this work. I think it's wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your work as well, because I've seen the parallels about, art education and kind of pure technique versus creativity, and how creativity can kind of be stifled in what's supposed to be a creative outlet. So yeah, thank you. Rachel, I think you were going to say something.
I was actually going to say exactly what Yana said.
Okay.
That I see your work really speaking to each other. And I wrote down this like traditional music education as kind of technique at the expense of freedom of expression. And I think Yana's saying something really similar about kind of traditional art education. All right. So you're both kind of speaking to opening up those creative arts to more people, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Caleb, I have a question. I think I heard you say that at least the participants that you selected were some of your more advanced students. Is that correct?
They were all kind of intermediate to advanced, except for the student who I'd actually had for a long time. So he was more of a beginner, but I thought that I could utilize the study to get him to a more advanced level, which actually ended up working in spades.
Cool. So do you think now, moving forward, will you use this technique with all of your students? Is it more appropriate for different types of students? What do you think?
I think that it really it could work for all types of students because so much of the work is about modifying your teaching to each student's needs. So at first I kind of had the mindset that students who weren't intermediate or advanced couldn't technically handle some of the music choices. There would be a lesser variety to choose from, but I kind of came away from it with takeaways that weren't only related to minority representation, but kind of just general allowing students to feel heard, allowing students to have a dialogue with me as an educator and modifying it. So I do think that it could be used for any student. It would look very different for students at any level.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I
Yeah.
think I think I just have one, and I don't know if I can't imagine the answer yet, but I'm wondering if you do quite a bit in your lit review about classical music and sort of like defining it and world, and I'm wondering if there's any learning from your study that helps speak back to that.
Yeah, actually, when I was adding some revisions yesterday, I kind of came away from the study saying it doesn't really matter, that even if classical is a Western genre and this instrument is typically associated with that genre, I don't think that that limits how it can be played. So my kind of takeaway was that classical can be defined as Western, and that's okay, and it doesn't really affect the outcome in the way that I was expecting it to.
Awesome. Anyone else? Yeah, Karen.
This is more just an appreciation than a question, but I have a 13-year-old violinist at home, and he did not want to play violin. He just wanted to quit the first 2-3 years. And I took him to this Seattle Symphony hosted event, which had a Black violinist and a Black cellist, and they were young and dynamic, and they played all kinds of music. And that was the moment, getting close to these folks who didn't look like him, but were not like the traditional white, middle class example representation. It was like, after coming back from that, it was like, oh yeah, this could be something that I identify with and relate to. And your project just illustrates that in such a powerful way. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that one day he gets to do what I did and goes out to perform with eyeliner, glitter in his hair, and leather pants, because that was one of the most liberating times of my life, was when I first got on stage and did that.
Awesome.
That's a wonderful dream for Corinne's child. I love it.
Like, that's a wonderful dream for everybody. All right, team.